let's get into some kind of bigger picture societal stuff. This is a lot of people are very concerned about this and talking about it. There's a new article in The Guardian recently titled "Fewer One Night Stands, More AI Lovers." The data behind Generation Z's sex lives. Article pointed out a lot of things that we already know. We've known for a while how we are in the middle of a sex recession among Gen Z. Gen Z are having much less sex than previous generations. 32% of Gen Z high schoolers have ever had sex, compared to 47% of millennials in 2013. Gen Z men are having less sex. One survey found 1 in 4 Gen Z adults aged 18 to 24 have not had partnered sex yet. 1 in 3 Gen Z men report never having partnered sex, compared to only 1 in 5 Gen Z women. There's also a disparity in singlehood. 63% of men under 30 are single, compared with 34% of women under 30. And the article also points some political divisions. Women are more liberal than men are. More young people are identifying as LGBTQ plus. I've tweeted about that dynamic a little bit recently. I don't want to spend too much time on that, but I mean, we can spend just a brief minute. Like, my sense of that, by the way, like stats, like 20% of Gen Z are like LGBTQ plus, or like 25%. All these like seemingly very alarming like statistics. Like a lot of that, I think, is these new categories, which are very like socially constructed, like gender fluid, non-binary, vague kind of ranges of queer. Like I don't think it's a lot of like some conservatives are suggesting that this is a lot of social media or political discourses turning guys gay or women gay. While that there might be some exceptions to that, I think that's largely not happening. I think this is more of the former of what I just said, the more socially constructed categories of gender fluid and non-binaries. I think there's a massive rise in that. And potentially even with women, which we know are more sexually fluid. So maybe more women are bi-curious or bisexual or gender fluid, whatever that means. Any thoughts on that quickly?
Yeah, I think that's accurate. We know that the percentage of people who are strictly homosexual, who are only interested in their own sex, is probably less than 1% for women, and it's about 2% for men, and that has been stable for many, many, many decades, right? As far back as we have good data on sexual orientation. But what has happened is you've had a rapid increase in the number of women who identify as bisexual, right? And there's always been a lot of so-called sexual fluidity among women where, and my wife, Diana Fleischman, has written extensively about this. Bisexuality for women can be a way to make friends and influence people, right? So it's not strictly kind of a sexual orientation, but it's a method of sort of female-female bonding. Male bisexuality is really quite rare. It seems to be, down around the level of male strict homosexuality. And then you get this huge catch-all category of queer, like I identify as queer. What does that mean exactly? Does it mean bisexual? For a lot of Gen Zs, it's basically a political label rather than a sexual orientation. So if you kind of set aside the self-identification as queer, which doesn't have any crisp meaning in terms of your actual sexual preferences, there actually has not been that much change in the overall rate of either gay or lesbian orientation, a little bit of an increase in female bisexuality. To me, the big confusion that Gen Z faces about sex is this huge disparity between what they see on social media, right, particularly TikTok, Instagram, Reddit, and indeed OnlyFans, versus real life, on the ground behavior of actual high school and college students and young people. So the pop culture of social media would suggest that Gen Z is uniquely promiscuous and kinky and bisexual and sexually adventurous and dressing provocatively. And that's kind of like the public facing image that Gen Z presents to itself, right? But the actual private behavior is Gen Z is having way less
Mm,
sex and way fewer relationships and is not
yeah.
nearly as promiscuous as, like, if you look at the data for my generation, Gen X, right? I was in college in the mid 80s. We had so much sex compared to millennials and compared to Gen Z.
Mm,
And this was at a time when, like, I got to college right around the time that the AIDS crisis was first hitting New York. And I was at college in New York at Columbia. And we were like, oh my God, that's terrifying. But you know what? We're going to keep having sex anyway. We don't care. Like, incurable disease that's a death sentence, right? If you get with the wrong partner, didn't phase us at all. Like, the prospect of global thermonuclear war at the height of the Cold War didn't phase us at all. So when I hear Gen
right.
Zs being like, oh my God, the world is so dire, like the world is 2 degrees hotter than it was 150 years ago. I'm like, you guys aren't facing nuclear war. You're
Yeah.
not facing an AIDS crisis. Come on, get your act together.
Has there been? I want to go back to the LGBTQ thing in a second, but you've got segued into a new thing too, which is there have there been big jumps in sexual promiscuity or sexual activity in your what's your generation
Gen X,
from Gen X, and then what's after that?
millennials.
Yeah, okay. Is there a big jump between Gen X and millennials, similar to millennials and Gen Z?
I think millennials were kind of maintaining about the same rate of um, sexual adventurousness. I think it was reduced a little bit by the kind of Me Too concern about consent and date rape and all of that. That put a bit of a damper on the younger millennials in the last, I would say, 10 to 15 years. Um, but the huge drop in sexual partner numbers is mostly a Gen Z thing compared to
Hmm. Okay.
sort of millennials.
Really? So there wasn't a big jump in sexual activity from your generation and millennials?
In fact, I think it decreased a bit from Gen X to millennials if you
Yeah. Okay.
compare age to age. Yeah.
Gotcha. And just to go back to the LGBTQ thing for a second, I tweeted out the other day. I don't know if you saw. I said eventually all of us are going to be in the LGBTQ plus
Yeah.
category because
Yeah.
every day there's a new sexuality, and I mean, I would like to think this is a joke, and I don't know how many people actually consider this part of LGBTQ, but there is. It's called sapiosexual.
Mhm.
Is if you're turned on by intelligence. There's
Yep.
demisexual if you're turned on by emotional connection. And so I tweeted out, I said, guys, I'll be at the next Pride Parade because I'm probably both of those.
Yeah.
I love intelligent, attractive
Mhm.
women. Emotional connection, but that's like everyone, right? At least the emotional
Mhm.
connection. Some people like myself, who are quasi nerds, we like women who are well read. But it's like there's all the like this is all very socially constructed, and it's like
Mhm.
you go back. There's a meaningful difference between being heterosexual and homosexual, but sapiosexual is like what is like that's not a meaningful category really. But yeah, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, you can expand the plus in LGBTQ plus category kind of as much as you want if your kind of political allegiance is like you must support LGBTQ rights, and so the more inclusive that category is, maybe the more support you get. Um, I mean, sapiosexual is, at one level it is kind of a thing. At another level, it really isn't. So the sense in which it isn't is, a lot of my research for decades has been about why exactly are most humans sexually attracted to intelligence and creativity and general behavioral competence, right? So I've done a lot of research on intelligence and IQ testing and so forth. And it's a pretty common, like, human universal across cultures that when men and women are trying to choose a serious long term partner, like a marriage partner, they pay a lot of attention to, is this person smart and competent,
Mm,
right? It's always one of the top two or three most desired traits for both men and women seeking long term mates across all cultures that have been studied.
mm,
So, in a sense, we're all sapiosexual.
yep.
Um, Men relax that standard a bit right? When they're looking for short-term mates,
Mm.
right? So
Even
like,
long term, right?
well, no, what happens is men don't care much about the IQ of their casual sex partners. True, right? Men don't care much about intelligence if they're just dating casually. But their selectivity about intelligence gets as high as women's for long-term mating. And this is why you see married
Hmm.
couples correlating pretty strongly on IQ, right? Because they're mutually selecting each other for intelligence.
Yeah, and the cues for that are like how many books she's read, having a deep conversation, alluding to historical or literary text, like different things like that.
Right. I mean, those are some ways to demonstrate general intelligence. But the magic thing about general intelligence is it is general. So it manifests itself in virtually anything that you can do that is challenging.